Before I proceed, I want to introduce you two of my guests, my two birds, one on my head and one on my shoulder. So since I'm at home, they always are with me. I can't put them in the cage, so they wanted to come and sit on my head. So I hope you don't mind that they're accompanying me on this webinar. So my bird on my head and on my shoulder. Um, okay, my topic that I want to address today is this is not a formal speech, but this is sharing some of my thoughts that because of pandemic, I began to reflect on this because what has happened to the whole system of education. And our education became upended, and we use the word education, which in Greek is paideia, right? And the paideia in Greek has a very rich and unique meaning. It means, paideia means upbringing or cultural training, and not just a mere schooling or formal education. And what has happened over the years is that the upbringing of the paideia has disappeared and has become more of simply schooling and formal education. And our beloved Aristotle, you all love him, he believed that the purpose of a school, and in fact, I'm originally from India, so I also bring that idea of Gurukul, school, small place where you go for upbringing, paideia, was to develop and exercise students' potential for reasoning, for ethical character, and of course, then provide a skill and knowledge base. But the primary part of that was potential for reasoning, to develop the potential for reasoning and for ethical character. So, and Aristotle thought the purpose of schooling was to develop dispositions and habits that exercise reason and formation of human ethos. So if you look at the philosophy of education, and where I'm leading to, I want to point out how what I call the industrialization of education. Education has become an industry, a business, a big industry, a big factory. So I want to point out what happened, when it began to. I know in Europe, in Greece, it continues still the tradition of social democracy, where education still is a public good. But slowly, there is also what has happened to American education is becoming the model to Europe and other parts of the world as well. So the philosophy of education has a long history from going back to Socrates when he was battling with the sophists in India, in Asian tradition, the Vedic tradition in India, in China, the Confucian philosophy of emphasis on personal and governmental morality, correctness of social relationships, justice, kindness, sincerity. These were the foundations of paideia, of education. And many of the distinguished figures in that tradition incorporated educational concerns into their broader philosophical agendas. Now, some of the scholars here in the United States in the 70s, and they were kind of concerned about where the education is going, particularly in the 70s in the United States. So the researchers at Harvard University, Peters and Hurst, they concluded that a person who was educated, educere, the Latin word, rather than instructed or indoctrinated, they made a very clear distinction between being educated and being instructed. And he says the one who is educated, not merely instructed, is changed for better, has become a better person. This change has evolved the acquisition of knowledge and intellectual skills and the development of understanding. And the third point they make, the person has come to care or to be committed. And let me emphasize that. An educated person, not merely instructed, the educator has come to care and be committed the domains of knowledge, of course, and also to the people in general for the greater good. So, and they conclude, particularly Peters, in his later book in 1970, he says, kind of developed this notion that education is an initiation for lifetime learning. So you are being initiated for a lifetime learning. Now what happens? So let me fast forward here and talk about the industrialization of education. Education has become an industry. We go back, we all, I'm sure, are familiar with the economist, neoliberal economist, Friedrich Hayek. Friedrich Hayek, the Austrian, he introduced the neoliberalism. And what is neoliberalism? And let me shape the definition, the understanding of neoliberalism for the purpose of understanding our education. So neoliberalism is understood that all reality can be explained on the model of economic competition. Everything is economic competition. And that all human activity can be measured in terms of wealth, value, and price. Everything. So that's why we ask, for example, which I think is a very wrong question, what is the value of your education? In America, we constantly ask that question. What's the value of education? And when they ask the question, what's the value of education, they usually mean how much you're going to earn after this degree. After you get this degree, how much salary, how much money will you earn? But see, so this is the Friedrich Hayek introduced these notions of neoliberalism and says every human activity is measured in terms of wealth, value, and price. So price in particular was a means to allocate scarce resources. Our education became very expensive, particularly in America. Every year, the price. So it became very scarce. So when prices go up, people think that there is a shortage. Therefore, somehow I must be there. Otherwise, I will miss the best. So, and for its efficient function, so you said price, the market had to be free and competitive. So education had to be free and competitive. We have to compete. And so it became, so what did Hayek introduced? We knew the market and the market economy, it was fine, but Hayek made a very significant change, which changed the whole landscape. For him, the market was not just a term of economic activity, where you go and do economic activity, but he said it's a market society. The whole society became a market, not just a place where you do the market, mall or shop or somewhere, but the whole society, people, everyone is, every individual becomes a market. So for him, the whole society becomes a market. Hence, he could extrapolate a vision of human beings as creatures who could or should follow their own self-interest. So everybody had to follow their own self-interest. So that means it removed the notion of paideia, of taking care, of upbringing, of cultural solidarity, all those things kind of gone away. So everything became self-interest. What is in it for me? That became the key question. And many times people ask, whenever you go with a proposal, with a suggestion to your chair, to the head of your department, they usually ask nowadays, what is in it for you? What are you going to benefit out of this? Oh, it says, are you going to get promotion? Are you going to get some stipend? Are you going to get raise in your salary? So, we are looking for that self-interest and competition of scarce resources. So, through this human competition, we would learn who and what is really valuable. So, whoever makes more money definitely becomes more valuable.
Don't talk while
So here what we have now, in this context, education became a commodity. a commodity to be that we can buy and sell in a supermarket. The notion of the supermarket kind of also became was introduced in the universities, which is okay. The students come, pay some money for one particular course. What do you want to take? And of course, the students also began to think, well, I paid the money, therefore I should pass the course. Why am I failing? Why am I not getting full grade? Why am I getting only, instead of getting 100 points, why am I
Mute your microphone, Leandre.
why am I getting only 50 points? I paid full money. So that commodity, the commodification of education became very much part of it. So education became monetized. How do I make money out of education? So thus what has happened, education, paideia, turned to be a corporatized enterprise, a business with the full corporate word, board of trustees, board of governors, the president, exactly the whole top layer. Right? It's a corporation. It's a corporatized enterprise. So education became more and more, began to gain utilitarian value. What is the utility of your education? Now imagine Aristotle probably will be so upset how this paideia ended up becoming, what is in it for me? Utility. What is the utility of my degree? What is the utility of this particular course that I'm taking? So utilitarian. What is the value of education? That's the word we use. And the answer that is expected, oh, there's a great value for my education because as soon as I graduate, I will get a job that will give me $100,000 salary. So if you look at the United States, this was coming slowly. The ideas of market society were percolating in American thinking. And Hayek had many disciples in the United States, particularly at the University of Chicago, which is known as the Chicago School of Economics, which later on was headed by Milton Friedman, one of the renowned economists who got a Nobel Prize. And it was in the 70s, the high time. And of course, if you have a president in the United States, a fellow by name Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan became the follower of Milton Friedman and the economic theory of free market, market society, and of course, the economy of scale. So everything has to become big. If you don't grow, and then we have now from the 70s, education became a product to be marketed. A product to be marketed. So every college now in America, and I don't know about much in Europe or in Greece, has a department of marketing department. So it has to be marketed. So the federal government policy shifted towards privatization of education. So government removed the money, the funding, and says, go and find your own money. Then, of course, the donors and all kinds of things, campaigns began to take place. So it shifted once the money was moved out of education, and the universities and colleges were left to raise their own funds and thus go the corporate model. And so the policies of the government in the 70s laid the foundation for the commodification of education. Education as a commodity to be sold and bought in the marketplace. So education became part of the economy of scale. And economy of scale, what I like to call mega universities. So everything now, if you are not a mega university, if you are not a university with a global presence, you are not a good university. That is how we began to think of it. So the education became part of the economy of scale. And what happens? We introduced the metrics of the industry to measure the success of education. So it's okay. Now that we have commodified education, how do we measure it? It's no longer we are using the quality of education, but quantity. Quantification has to be measured. So if it is not measured, it did not happen. If I cannot measure what you're teaching in a classroom, that means you did not teach. That's how even myself I've been teaching for the last 30 years. I've been hearing these changes taking place. How do we quantify what you have taught in the classroom? The quantification. So they brought the metrics of the industry, the metrics of the factory were applied to assess the productivity. Is the professor productive? How do we know a professor is productive? Because after the class of 1 hour, we measured, and out of 30 students, 25 gave positive answers. That means professor is productive. And so, see, what the role of the professor or the teacher also began to change. So teacher here, what I like to call it in a kind of little graphic way, is a manufacturer of widgets, manufacturer of, of glasses, a manufacturer of things. Because at the end, you are asked, how many glasses did you manufacture? 10, 20. Okay, you are productive. So that was the matrix that was used to determine productivity of the professors. So, and all that in the name of efficiency. So if you want to become efficient, what you do? You privatize, you outsource, and you scale up, and you shift the knowledge. Now, it's not about knowledge, it's about skills. So everybody's talking about skills. What skills are they teaching you in this college? What skills are they teaching you in this class? So it's not, the question is not what knowledge have you gained, but what skills have you acquired? So that I can take those skills in the marketplace for a job. But interestingly, the skills that I've learned in the classroom now, today, in 6 months, they become useless because new skills are needed, because new technology has come in. So what is the point of learning the skills in the college? Because they are going to be obsolete by the time I graduate, by the time I get a degree. So, but anyway, we are looking for skills. So quantification and not the quality became the measure to assess the success. So emphasis is on preparing students for what? Not to become good citizens, the way Aristotle would say, but to become human resources for the workplace, for the factory, for the corporation. The corporation would say, oh, you universities are not preparing good candidates for us to hire. So what do you want? We want this and this. So the corporations began to dictate how the curriculum should be. And so we are preparing for the workforce and not to become good citizens. So teaching and teachers eventually became degraded. In America, particularly, the salaries are the lowest among all. They began to be, more on the conservative side. Business people, economists began to say, well, teachers only spend 3 hours or 4 hours in the classroom per day. What are they doing? They are not productive. So they never understood what is the work of a teacher, preparing for classes, assessing the students' assignments, work. Never understood that the teachers work 18, 20 hours a day sometimes. And so for each class, we put in 3-4 hours to prepare for these classes. Now, not taken into account, but simply said, okay, if you're not actually in front of the students, you are not doing the work. That means you are wasting time. That means you are not being productive. So teachers were degraded, and in America, the lowest paid in the educated workforce are the teachers. And thus, what happened? Education became technologized, which is presented to us, as you would say in Latin, Deus ex machina. So Deus ex machina, and so it says, okay, we are making technology is going to produce. Don't worry, we don't need good teachers. We just need someone to push the buttons on the computer there, because many of these publishing companies now in America have taken over the teaching. Actually, they take over the Wiley company, publishing company. Then there are 2-3 major companies who have taken over the actual teaching. So education as a public good is shifted to those only who can afford. Public funding for education has increasingly and significantly diminished. Now, what has happened, another point I want to make is education versus instruction, taking from the idea of Peters. So he says, okay, we are instructed. Yes, the focus is more on instruction, not so much on education in the understanding of paideia, upbringing of the person, fostering good character. That is not focus of the education. Now, interestingly, COVID-19, this pandemic, has exposed the cruelty, the inefficiency, and the foolishness of our education system. And this pandemic now is a wonderful occasion for us to rethink and recast where we are going to go with our education, how we are going to position ourselves, our educational system. And so I would like to ask our colleagues in the educational system to kind of engage into some kind of a collective thinking and simply, instead of simply following the trend, start saying, wait a minute now, let us ask some radical questions, difficult questions, and say, where are we going? We don't have answers, easy answers, but we need to ask difficult questions, particularly at this time, given the pandemic has given us an opportunity. This is as much as a disaster, but it's also an opportunity to say, wait a minute now, we cannot go on the way we have been going on, so the way we have gone on. So I say education must be focused on primarily, first and foremost, on educating good citizens, first and foremost. And then, yes, instruction, knowledge of skills, labor force, whatever. Education as a public good must be restored. Public funding must be provided, and the local university. Now, this is another interesting point. The local university traditionally, and this continues still in a European model, is a public. The local university is the anchor of the local community, dedicated for the formation and development of the minds and hearts of the local citizens, rather than transforming into a fancy. In America, they become country clubs, very fascinating campuses, where expensive education is sold. Expensive education is sold. Interestingly, just this morning, one of the top universities in the world, based in England, is in trouble. London School of Economics, I'm sure you all are familiar with that, as of this morning, is in trouble. Because 68% financially trouble. They have no money. 68% of their student body is international. And now, in the pandemic, they are not coming to England. So that whole model, that London School of Economics has based itself as the mega university, as the global university, now is falling apart. Kind of goes against the European tradition of the cathedra, of the universities are particularly, taking care of a particular community, where they have opened up. Greece is full of that tradition. I was privileged to be 20 years ago in Athens and walking the grounds of the Athenaeum and looking at the Lyceum where Aristotle was teaching. So what was there going on? They were taking care of the local community. And so I think many of our universities in America, they were established to educate the local community, to become the anchor for the local community. And that place became where upbringing of the citizen was taking place collectively. One thing, you do the upbringing in the family as a family member, then you come to university of the particular community where you become get upbringing for the larger society. And so now I just want to add by making a comment about kind of how a student becomes also industrialized, has considered to be industrialized. And I'm taking a definition from a great philosopher, educational philosopher, Daniel Bell, who was a long-time professor at Columbia University in the 50s and 60s. And this is now in 1958, he wrote this. He says, industrialization did not arise with the introduction of factories. It arose out of measurement of work how we are measuring work. It is when work can be measured. If I can measure your work, when you can, then you can put a harness, you can put a rope around this particular person and measure his output in terms of single piece. One piece. What did you do? You made one glass, you made one cell phone, and pay that person by the piece, pay him out by the piece that he makes or she makes in terms of single piece, and pay him by the piece or by the hour, not by the overall work, by the hour. That you then, he says, that is the modern industrialization. The modern industrialization is when people are paid by the hour, when people are paid by the piece, one piece they manufacture or they build, and not by their overall value as a person, as a citizen, what they contribute. So I just want to end here, and I would like to say Evaristo. So thank you very much, and I hope my little presentation has been of some help here, and love to hear from you, your questions, your comments, whichever way. Thank you, Evaristo.